Hello, hello. Welcome to the Good Garbage Podcast. My name is Ved Krishna. My primary reason for existence has been to find ways to leave our wonderful planet cleaner. We will be speaking with material innovators, creators, and propagators to learn from them how we can build for scale and towards a regenerative future. Their stories will help us answer the big question: what is good garbage? It was so wonderful to have a conversation with Reyna Bryan of RCD Packaging. This is both a personal and a professional conversation, working to understand all Reyna does and how she expects the material world to evolve. Her power lies in bringing people together to collaborate and find solutions.
Nature has already found ways to achieve incredible moisture vapor barrier, achieve incredible oxygen barrier, and different types of packaging, if you will. And there's so many of our technical problems have already been solved, but you have to be willing to slow down and look at the natural world and see what you can find.
Hello, hello. I'm so happy today to have my friend Reyna Bryan on the show. Reyna has been doing some amazing work when it comes to flexible films and regenerative packaging in general. I have to tell a little bit of a backstory before I get into this conversation. So, our common friend Sandeep Kulkarni told me about the work Reyna was doing. And as soon as I heard about it, I was just so excited that I started looking up all the work that she was doing. And then, of course, we got on a call, and I've been so inspired by the work that you do and the way you do it, Reina. So I'm just so happy to have you on this show, and I'm excited for everybody else to hear more about the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love the concept of this show, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
Thank you, Reina. So I'm going to actually step back a little bit to your childhood. And if you can think about your earliest memories of packaging, it'd be great to share that.
Yeah, well, got to dig a little deep there, but what comes up for me is I remember this moment of seeing a trash can that had trash just like kind of bubbling over the top. And I must have been 8 or 9 at the time, and just walking down the street, and I just thought to myself, okay, I see that trash can. I think like at the next corner, I saw another trash can, the same situation. And in my little mind, it went from thinking about all the trash cans I've seen in my own journey of life. And if I'm just one little city, then what's going on in all these other cities? And somehow my brain just went from that little trash can to like thinking of it globally. And I just thought, oh my gosh, we are doing something wrong. We are doing something wrong. And I just also remember hearing about whales coming up, and they'd find plastic in the belly. And I was just like, it would make me sick to my stomach. It's like a disease we needed to find a fix for, we needed to heal. And so I think that was really a big part of what shaped my own personal mission and what helps me put on my pants and work another day in this world.
So your journey started really early. 8 or 9 is a very early impact. Did your folks shape that side of you as well?
My parents were always about wanting us to be curious about learning and knowledge. And I was very much blessed that they would just kind of support us in whatever direction we were going. I wouldn't say they were particular like tree huggers per se, but we did go camping, and we, being from Colorado, just nature lovers culturally. And how it all came to be, I didn't think when I was 9, oh my gosh, I'm going to get into sustainable packaging. But I do remember out of high school thinking, I really want to make a good impact. What do I need to do? And my brain at that time was like, you know what? Why don't you study engineering? Because at least you can learn how the world works from like a mechanical, physical way and start from there. And so that's why I went into mechanical engineering. It's a broad aspect of the engineering practice, and helped me start wrapping my head around some of the dynamics of the industry that I'm in.
So the path that you actually chose is so intriguing. And of course, that is what really connected us, is that of flexible films. And I think just people don't talk about it enough. We talk about the easy plastic carry bag a lot more than we talk about flexible films. It'll be great for you to talk about, flexible films in general and the impact that they have on environment, and why did that idea really draw you in?
When I first said I want to go into sustainable packaging, one of the first things I did was I took all the money that was in my little savings account and I bought a ticket to Expo West, which is the big conference for the natural food industry in Anaheim. It's very expensive to go and you're basically right out of college. But I really wanted to see, okay, where is sustainable packaging now? I'm super excited to jump into the ring here and make some moves. And when I got there, I was incredibly shocked. I was practicing zero waste at that time. I had my little jars and I went in there like very excited. But when I first walked in, I was incredibly shocked at just how much waste was everywhere and that there was not a lot of sustainable packaging options. And you really get a sense of the sheer volume behind the scenes when you're looking at all the brands side by side. And so much of the industry is using flexible films. And I learned a lot about how they do not have a recycling solution and they're lightweight, they easily get into the environment. And I think what intrigued me the most is how much functionality is built into that little flexible film structure and how much engineering went into it to make those materials perform the way they do. And so to me, it became a bit of a puzzle. How can we create these packages out of materials that are designed to break down safely in the soil, but also have the right performance characteristics? And how do we do it so it works on the same manufacturing equipment that the CPG industry is using?
And how long back was the Anaheim journey?
I don't know, but it was more than 10 years ago.
Wow, that's been a while, and you getting attracted by that one domain, which is extremely complex. I couldn't agree more because it's so well engineered to you can open a bag of crisps 6 months after it's manufactured and it's going to smell and taste exactly as the day it was made. And
Yeah.
for that, you need significant properties of barrier for air and moisture to be able to do it. So I want to know more about your zero waste journey. What was that like, and how long did you follow that, and what did that teach you?
Oh gosh. Well, it's for me, it's one of those constant personal habit battles. I practice zero waste and then I find myself at the airport without snacks or without thinking ahead. And I'm like, gosh, just give me this plastic wrapped something or other. I'm starving. So it's a constant journey for me. I still have a long ways to go, but yeah, it started many years ago. And I even did some work with Lauren Singer, who started the PepsiCo. I went out to New York and we spent some time together. So I learned a lot about how she thought of the world. And I did my own work. I had my own little zero waste kit. And I also was really interested in the psychology around habit changing, because I thought to myself, man, we have so much changing to do as a species. I better prove that I can change within myself. And it's not easy to change our habits. And so I think what that has done for me is, while I do strive to practice zero waste, which is, bring my water bottles, really think of where I'm buying things. I love kitchens that have like all the beans and like the clear ball jars. And I just love that look and feel, and it's calming. So while I strive for that lifestyle, I also know we need to make sustainability convenient. We need to systematically build in solutions, like what materials we're using, how we're transporting goods, how people get access to their groceries. We need to make these truly sustainable solutions systematic.
Yeah.
Because, man, we are terrible at changing habits. So we got to build it in.
Yeah, and I think it's a more difficult task to have people change their habit. You might as well change the substrate than having people change the habit, or at least you and me are on that journey of finding better substrates. And then, of course, there are other people who are working on changing habits. So hopefully
Yeah.
they can succeed, and so can we. And the world becomes a better place. My moment of truth when I shifted to America came when I went to Costco the first time.
Oh,
I was just aghast. Everything was packaged, and I was like, wow. And people
yeah.
loved it. And so, yeah, that was a real moment of reckoning for me. So, you get this idea of flexible films. You went deeper in and understood the structures, etc. And you get into this whole idea of redefining flexible film innovations workshop. How did that arc happen? How did you go from understanding and then, of course, wanting to create better substrates and then creating this cohort?
So basically, the reason I got into sustainable packaging is I wanted to find ways to make sustainable packaging the norm. And I think when you're young, you're like, okay, I'm just going to get in there. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to find that lever. I'm going to pull it and all is going to be well. And then you get in there and you realize about all the subtle dynamics across the supply chain, what's going on with policy, what's happening with different incentives and where the money is and how people think. I quickly learned that we had an uphill battle in the realm of sustainable packaging. Specifically that, there's a lot of misinformation across the supply chain. People don't understand or know how to discern one material type to the other. There's a lot of questions about material management. And as I was working up and down the supply chain, from compounding resins to films to converting to, co-packing, I was realizing that there was a lot more questions than answers and people were not seeing the whole picture. And I also realized, oh my gosh, if we don't have a breakthrough approach, we are not going to make the changes we need fast enough. And so I did something in my business school. When you study business, it's like, this is not what you do. But I thought that it was critical to get it done. And so what I ended up doing was I personally invited customers and suppliers and everybody that I trusted and loved in the industry. And I brought them to basically like a year-long collaborative innovation party.
Wow. Yeah.
That was forced to be remote, which is hilarious. But I think also what fed into it is before I got into sustainable packaging full on, I did do innovation consulting work for a management consulting company. And that taught me a lot about the innovation process, design thinking, and the methodology that goes within that. And I had a lot of great advisors in that part of the industry. And so I brought those two worlds together, and I brought, like I said, representatives from each part of the industry together. And we used the design thinking framework to shape our overall pathway and come up with a way for everybody to engage throughout the process and begin to not only fill out their understanding of the industry, but also begin to come up with ideas for potential solutions on some of the biggest challenges we're facing as an industry.
Yeah, that's really amazing, because it takes a lot of courage because you don't really have immediate monetization in place. So it takes courage. It takes a leap of faith. Did everybody just jump on the bandwagon and were they all excited? Did you have to pursue some people? How did you decide that I need so many people from the customer side, so many people from the research side, so many people from the manufacturing side?
These are all good questions. So what I did was I had this vision of what if we did an industry-wide innovation workshop, and has this ever been done before? And what the heck would we do? Where would we start? So I did call my advisor, Phil Samuel. He's a leader in design thinking. And he said, my rule of thumb is you want is maximum 8 tables of 8. That's manageable. If you have 10 tables of 8, we could still make it work. And I said, okay. So in my mind's eye, I had about the number of 80, just to know manageable, because the intention was to have a big portion of that event in person in San Francisco at like a beautiful venue. And so I knew kind of on the number side. And I put together a proposal, and I ran it by one of my partners at the time, which was OSC2. They do some good work in education for the industry. And then I took the proposal to Brad Rogers. He was at PepsiCo at the time.
Yeah, I know.
And I was like, hey man, what if I did this thing? Like, would you guys be interested? And he literally called me 2 days later and he was like, hey, well, what if we threw 50 grand into that?
Wow.
Then
okay.
is when I was like, okay, let's put something together here. Let's see what we need to do to make this real. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I had to put together like the proposal in like a deck form. Wow. And let's talk to the various people in the industry and seed their thinking. And we kept the entry price really low. I didn't win on this one economically, but I did win in terms of my own self-development and my relationship development. I'm so happy we did this, but we were able to actually offer a very affordable price. I think that helped because a lot of people were coming in. This is kind of a risky vibe. Like you're about to have conversations with people that you normally compete with potentially, and they didn't necessarily know what they were going into. So I just made it as friendly as possible. And I also hand selected the people that were coming. I made sure we did not include people that had ever postured in the industry in an uncollaborative way, or that I knew would be at risk to other partners.
You just took it a step higher for me. You made people pay to come and participate in a workshop, which would lead to a solutionizing. That's a great way to do it, because you get people who are truly interested. Otherwise, there's no skin in the game. Okay, you've been invited, and there's a lot of bigwigs in that list that you have. How difficult was it to coordinate? Because you were clearly the central piece, the coordinator of getting this to an actionable state.
Luckily, I had a teammate, her name was Callan Gonzalez, on my side, and she had done a lot of different event planning. And so she was there to make sure all the cats were heading in the same direction, and she was tracking emails from me. So the original intention was to do like 2/3 of the workshop remotely, and then we were going to do the final big innovation push towards the end in person. And that's what people are normally associate with innovation, sticky notes on the wall, working in groups. But then COVID hits, and we have to do the whole thing remotely. Luckily, because we had already planned to have the first portions remotely, I had put some frameworks in place. So we used this incredible innovation platform.
Yeah, we will have to put that on the show notes, because I'm sure you've mentioned this and others may want to look at it.
Yeah, we'll add this in the comments because it's amazing. I'll probably think about it as soon as I hang up with you. It's basically a secure platform that is almost designed like Facebook. So you can have these posts and people could comment on each other's posts. And I had the ability to curate this experience completely. And so I did that. I created it so that it would be in alignment with the design thinking process: define, discover, design, demonstrate. And I was able to also upload all the expectations. What is the purpose of this? Why are we doing this? All of that was built into this online platform. And we used that to make sure we were tracking our thinking and so that everybody could meet each other too. It was unique, but in that we had like the head of R&D for big organization XYZ, and these people were all essentially executive level operators within their own organization. And so we had to come up with a way to be able to say, once a month, we're going to meet for an hour and a half and we're going to knock out a bunch of work together. And we had to keep it lean and mean like that.
I see there's so much that came out of that. I read 1,500 ideas, 9 cohorts. So that's a huge amount of possibilities. But how did biomimicry get to be a part of this ideation? And then did you start with the idea of flexible films, or was that an end result?
When it comes to packaging, as you know, that it's like there's many different types of formats. Each type of format has its own supply chain, and it can get kind of complicated in terms of the technical understanding of how those elements come together. Flexible films is unique in that it is one of the fastest growing packaging formats. It has some great benefits in terms of its barrier properties and its lightweight nature, in terms of the amount of material that's required to get the performance that's coming. But these materials were never designed with the end in mind. And I talk about this, where you have these brilliant engineers that are like coming up with the best solution ever, but nobody ever told them that, hey, let's also design this with, can this be biodegradable safely? It's a beautiful packaging structure that is wreaking all sorts of havoc in the natural world. It easily escapes. It's too expensive to try to collect and make sense of on the back end. And so it's a perfect opportunity for innovation. I wanted to get specific in where we were going in terms of what problems are we trying to solve. Because if we try to say, let's do an innovation workshop about sustainable packaging, you're already all over the place. But flexible film did at least provide a scoping, as well as it allowed me to say, okay, now we know we're in flexible film, let's grab specific people that are of that very specific supply chain. So biomimicry is something that I saw in college for the first time, but it didn't touch my life professionally until Phil Samuel was saying, hey, this is a practice we want to fold into our innovation process at the management consulting firm I was working for. That's when I started really understanding and learning some of the actual tools within the biomimicry framework. And I just wanted that to be a part of a lens that I looked through everything with. And it's really about, honoring and getting excited about the technology that's already inherent in nature and what we can learn from nature.
Absolutely.
Nature has already found ways to achieve incredible moisture vapor barrier, achieve incredible oxygen barrier, and different types of packaging, if you will. And there's so many of our technical problems have already been solved, but you have to be willing to slow down and look at the natural world and see what you can find. Also, by the way, all these solutions work well and will break down safely in a natural environment. So it's a school of thought that I think should be ingrained in everything that we do. And one of the things I wanted to do was introduce it to the corporate space that I was living and tell people in our industry, hey, this is a school of thought that could help your business on so many levels. Let's make it a foundational aspect of this innovation workshop and seed people's thinking in that way as well. So I think we had 5 biomimics as part of the group, and it was just an honor to work alongside with them. And I know that the brands and the suppliers, they just got incredibly excited about the insights that they were gaining from that worldview.
Did everybody else know about the whole domain of biomimicry, or did you have to do a little bit of coaching?
We did some coaching, and there was a lot of concepts that we were introducing. And so part of my strategy was to have like the design thinking methodology. And then on top of that was we were building a framework of knowledge. And part of that was biomimicry. And we introduced biomimicry in the context of innovation process and how it can be used. And we had some people from Biomimicry 3.8 present on what biomimicry is. And so we had educational sessions built into part of our design work sessions. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we were weaving that school of thought throughout.
Yeah, that's just wonderful because it's so needed and we know so little at times. So presumably you use life principles as a parameter to judge the end sort of inspirations. Was that the case?
Yes, and like you said, there was 9 incubation projects that spun off, and one was a biomimicry specific project where we worked with a group to say, where in nature are we seeing the characteristic of water vapor barrier?
Yeah.
And can we find a way to map those out and learn from it? In that group, they did a lot of that very detailed biomimicry methodology. The concepts that you're talking about were introduced to the group. We had biomimicry inspirations planted into that shared innovation space.
Yeah.
We weren't able to step through every single step of the biomimicry innovation process from a technical standpoint. So I wish we had more time for that. I think we could go do a whole nother one and just make it even more biomimicry centered. Let's do it.
Yeah. On a more practical side, you've mentioned this a couple of times in terms of inspirations in nature that do water vapor or air barriers. Just for the listeners, could you list down 5 or 6 inspirations that you have found? I could look at these, and these would be really great to learn from and adapt into the flexible packaging space.
So inspirations of nature applicable to flexible packaging?
Yeah.
Anything that's around like insect shells or seashells, there's a lot of interesting functionality on the microsurfaces of those. Leaves that have like a wax crystallization happening. Eggs, of course, are fascinating because they have excellent barrier, and there's a lot of things happening in those membranes that are of interest in terms of containing moisture and keeping things inside moist. And I don't have it in front of me, but we put together a whole map of potential species and organisms to track, and looking specifically at the functionality of that world of moisture vapor, which is one of the leading challenges of flexible film for the biomaterials sphere.
Yep.
Oh, another thing I love too is like looking at colors more from like the butterfly wing effect. Inks and coatings.
Oh yeah, amazing.
So much gnarliness can go into making beautiful colors, and it's not necessary. We could do things differently if we look at the way butterfly wings create color.
Do you want to elaborate on the reflection system in the butterfly wing?
Oh yeah. Well, it has something to do with the way our eyes see wavelengths and see colors. And so it's actually like a micro patterning on the surface of the wing. that bounces light off in a unique way that creates the illusion of the color being there. Instead of it being a pigment, it's more structural.
Yeah, and otherwise it's all brown.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, right? Otherwise it's all
Oh,
brown.
totally.
The other one, Reina, which I was really inspired by, is the water spider web. Because the water spider creates a web underwater and carries air from the surface and puts it into the web and then procreates, eats, everything is in this. So, of course, it's a natural flexible pack because it's inside the water, but it also sort of tends to take in some oxygen from the water. So, it also has a diffusion mechanism because nature's building blocks are relatively simple. So, what I was going to mention in the water spider is that it's fundamentally amino acids and proteins. So did you get more to the ideas of the building blocks, as in what are nature's building blocks, and how do we adapt that more to the industry?
Yeah, we did start to get into that. What one approach to take is you look at aspects in nature that are of interest, and you can look at what's happening, at a micro level, and you can say, can we repeat these structures of materials, and can we do it at a commercial scale? I think that's one of the challenges you have is you're looking at these different calcium carbonates or different waxes or different polymers. Can you build them using commercially available manufacturing techniques? And I think one of the things I'm seeing is it's going to require some innovation in how we build these packages, because so much of what I'm finding is of interest in what nature's doing has to do with the actual structural microstructures and how these worlds interact in terms of the chemistry across these different material types. And so you have to be able to almost have self-growing or self-building type microstructures and having them interact in a unique way. So a lot of opportunities for innovation in commercial scale manufacturing process.
Yeah. And that plugs in really well to my next direction and question. What would the process entail in terms of manufacturing? Because we see a lot of thinking around biomimicry when it comes to design, but we tend to not have so much when it comes to process. That's another area where we have to look at waste and how we capture that.
The current work was really focused around the functionality of oxygen moisture vapor, but you're absolutely right. One of the things to look for is how to get inspired by nature for the actual manufacturing process. And I think one of the things we looked at is nanofabrication techniques and how close or far are we off? Can we actually build out these structures on a micro level? And I'm always in between worlds where I'm visionary and I see this beautiful potential for us as a species, and then I'm also enough in the trenches where I'm standing alongside the ladies and the guys that have these very expensive assets. They've already invested multi-millions of dollars into these assets.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to understand our current capabilities from an asset side. What are our machines capable of? Because there's billions of dollars have been invested in these hard assets. Can they be converted in any way? Can you add subsequent processing stages into existing assets to achieve process you're trying to incorporate?
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to bridge those worlds, because I do think we need to, in many ways, I know we need to rethink the way we're doing things and rethink the way we're thinking of things, but we also need to find ways to leverage our existing assets, our existing infrastructure to get there, because otherwise not only are we going to be met with severe resistance, but because everybody needs to feed their family.
Yeah.
So if we can find ways to find modifications and adaptations to existing assets, that would obviously be a win-win. And so when we were looking at manufacturing solutions, we've always looked at, is there a way to modify some of these well-known, well-understood manufacturing processes and technologies to get where we need to get?
No, you're absolutely right. And it's very practical as an approach. You can't possibly think of billions of dollars of assets lying idle or not being used. And that's not very healthy as well. Probably it'll be a staged approach where we get to different structures and they can be manufactured on the same process. And then, of course, the process is getting more and more nature aligned. going forward.
Right.
But when you imagine the flexible film of the future, do you imagine it as a single substrate, a monomer kind of an idea with different possibilities, or do you still imagine it as a multi-layered substrate that will be more friendly?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a multi-material substrate, whether that's in layer form. That's an arguable point. One of the things that we stressed that came from the group is, can we design packaging that not only can fully compost and biodegrade, but actually brings nutrients to the natural world and to the natural systems?
Yeah, I love a quote by you that I saw: packaging that can be digested by nature. And that's beautiful. I think it's a great way to put it. So why do you think biopolymers or these substrates have to be more expensive? And do you think that there is a way to make them more economical and hence more cost effective?
I don't think that they need to be more expensive. I don't think they should be more expensive, and they are now.
Yeah.
And first of all, it's new technology compared to the conventional polymers that are out there. Those have been in development for 50 some years.
Yeah.
They're well established across the entire supply chain, and they have incredible economies of scale.
Yeah.
And plus, it's a waste product of oil and gas. I mean, they used to have vats of this stuff, and they're trying to find something to do with it. These new biopolymers, they don't have the same economies of scale, and they have a challenge growing in terms of volume throughput because of the current cost barrier. They're sometimes 3 to 4 times more expensive to get these polymers functional. Now, I think when you're talking about economics, not only do we have a duty to innovate on a material side, we have a duty to innovate our economic system. Our economic system is old school and does not actually account for the cost to the environment. And that's just silly, because without that information, the economic system cannot drive us and drive the free markets in the direction it needs to. As a result, you have these conventional polymers that are showing up as very inexpensive and cheap, when in fact they're incredibly costly to the natural world, incredibly costly to human health. And we need to address that so that these new biopolymers can get off the ground, can have more POs for these biopolymer companies, because the more POs they get, the more that capital is going to flow into those organizations. They're going to get scaled up in terms of their capabilities and their capacity.
Yeah.
They're going to improve in terms of performance. There is some important work we need to do to really level the playing field economically, because no, these materials shouldn't be more expensive. And this economic barrier, and it's a systemic issue, it has basically made it almost impossible for biomaterials to scale up and commercialize. And we need these materials real fast.
So you're basically talking about cost of externalities. Will that need a change in the statutory norms? Because you're right. In the end, there is somebody paying for disposal, and there is somebody paying if it's not getting disposed. Till it's a competitive landscape, it's very challenging for a FMCG products company to individually take that into account. It has to be a more systemic, like you mentioned, systemic change.
Yeah.
And it has to be for everybody. And then again, it has to be maybe global. So do you see that as a policy shift?
It's so funny you say the policy word. When I was young and getting into the biz, I was like, we can't count on these guys to agree on anything. Let's do this. Let's do this through the market. Let's make this happen. But, I have learned over the years how important policy is, especially right now, because we are learning how disjointed our human systems are with our living systems. And we're becoming conscious of this gap. We have to come to a consensus just from a strict value standpoint and say, okay, is this true? Is there an issue when we do not include the cost of externalities into the cost of goods sold? Can we all agree that that's having a negative impact on our free market's ability to drive innovation in the right direction? The next step would be, I would say, take a look at the global accounting principles. One of the stories I always give to help people better understand this is, when you took Economics 101, you learn about all the different costs associated with making a product. And one of the things you learn about is cost of externalities, which you brought up, which is, these are intangible. Often they used to be unmeasurable costs, like the cost of the environment, the cost of human health. Externalities were considered something you could not quantify. And so your economic professor would say, this is too complex, so we're just going to not include this in the calculation. My professor taught that to me, just ignore cost of externalities. Globally, every single person, when learning about economic theory and learning how valuation in our marketplace is calculated, stripped the cost of externalities out of the
Yeah.
equation. And in doing so, you basically all are unconsciously agreeing that this thing is not of value. And that is structurally built into our economic system right now.
Yeah.
Also, when we talk about measurement, all right, now we're talking about the cost of CO2 produced, the cost of water used. Life cycle assessment is a powerful methodology. It's not perfect. It doesn't account for toxins in the environment. It doesn't account for the cost of plastics in the ocean. There's some improvements to be built on there. We have the capability of doing this. We have the capability of bringing this knowledge into our global markets, and it should be brought in.
So I see you as this huge connector, and you tend to find these dots and you connect people and ideas. And you started this whole thing called recycling is sexy. What was that about?
Oh my God, and it's my baby project that I put on the it's on the back burner, but she still always wants to be into the world.
Uh-huh.
That project was all about material mindfulness and helping people discern the materials that flow through their everyday lives.
Okay.
And it was about understanding that we need to redefine recycling. But when I got out of engineering school and I was looking at the puzzle, I was realizing there was a disconnect between what people were expecting when they heard the term recycling to what actually was happening. And I was so curious about what this disconnect was. And over the years, I've learned so much about it, and I can, point to specific levers of opportunity there. We as a species need to be able to discern what materials are good for us and what are not. And that level of understanding and knowledge needs to be the norm. And so that was what that campaign was all about. And I do hope to eventually bring aspects of that back into my world, because it's also an art for me. Anything that has to do with education, media, design, that stuff is something that fills my cup. And this is no good. You probably have to edit this out, but one of the reasons for the brand Recycling is Sexy is I was a bit fed up with sustainability being like so brown paper bag, hug a tree. And I was like, what really works around here in America? I'm like, what we need to do? We need to throw some titties on it. And so that's how the whole campaign started, is this thought of
We are definitely not editing that out.
Yeah, just got to throw some titties on it, make it interesting to middle America, and they'll pay attention. So that was the whole idea behind that.
That's a really smart thought process, because you're right. We tend to go very, very earthy brown as soon as it comes to recycling, but it doesn't need to be like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's we got to make it attractive, and we have to normalize it, and it has to be systemic.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I was constantly trying to justify my role in an industry. And now I think there's a sea change where people see it. They see that it needs to be a requirement. They still need to find their way there, though, on the majority. And we all do. We are all still... It's the blind leading the blind. We're just all trying to get to where we need to go.
Yeah, but we'll get there. And so taking this towards closure, couple of questions. You are so inspired in this domain, but I'm sure you have inspirations. Mm-hmm. You have people that you see are doing great things in the space. Tell us about some of those.
Oh, that's a great one. I would say, there's so many. I'm excited to see what's happening in sustainable finance. Just seeing different groups of people pop up in different parts of the world or different parts of industry that I wouldn't expect. So, I really do love the work that regeneration.vc is doing, and Katie Hoffman, who's doing interesting work around the economics and how to build sustainability into that. All the works that are happening with like the PHAs of the world and people looking at seaweed and all these new areas of opportunity. I love the work that Mars is doing as a company, how they're shaping their thinking about innovation, and the biomimicry. All the leaders in the biomimicry world, how they fold their wisdom and try to bridge into our commercial world is
amazing.
Is so necessary, and we need to support them there. And I admire the way that they see the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. So my last question, if you think about good garbage, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think we have to think about it as nutrients to the next cycle.
Yeah.
With the circular economy model, you think of the technical materials and you think of the organic materials. You need to be really clear what each material is for and where it's going to go, and how do we make sure that we're not putting so many different types of materials into the system. We streamline what materials come into the system so that we know that they have a good place to go, and we make sure that they're staying high in their purity level. We need to think about our material management and our waste stream in a mass balance way. So I know this is a little bit of an engineering term. It's like if you have a bathtub with a certain capacity, you don't want to be like putting a fire hose worth of plastic material in it when you only have like a tiny little like pinhole of a way for that material to get out. We need to balance those material flows. So we need to make sure that any materials that we're bringing into the system have a place to go. And if they don't have a place to go, we stop putting those materials into the system.
It's very similar to what somebody else said to me. It's ultimately about everything becoming a nutrient for the next thing,
Yeah.
rather than it being dumped somewhere, whether it's a landfill or even burned. It's not ideal. Ultimately, it changes form, right? But it's not going to go out of the ozone layer.
Yeah.
It's going to stay right in one way or the other.
And we have to control the inputs. I think people get really hyper focused when we think about material management. We're like looking at the back end of this machine. We're like, how do we fix this? It's like anytime we're ever talking about good garbage, we have to be always talking about what's flowing in, the volumes of those materials. And you can't even have a recycled material market if you have so much virgin material flowing into the system that it upsets the price of recycled materials.
Each time I speak to you, it's such a joy and it's such an inspiration. And it's just like I have a partner in crime who's doing her own thing. I'm excited about your future and what you're going to bring. And I wish I had, these lenses that could see, all the impact that you're going to bring to the world tomorrow. So thank you for doing the work you do. Thank you for agreeing to having this conversation. It's such a joy to talk to you always.
I feel the same way. Thank you so much, Ben.
Reyna just concluded a 9-month workshop on redefining flexible films, assembling a cohort of over 80 experts across the supply chain. The condensed findings of this work can be found at rcdpackaging.com/innovation collab. I would urge you all to go read that paper. It's really wonderful. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to bringing you more and more ideas with guests in the coming weeks. Watch out for this space.